What seemed like a simple routine traffic stop turned into a nightmare that would shake an entire town. One officer's instinct uncovered a secret so horrifying it changed everything. Stay with us until the end to see how a friendly neighbor hid the unthinkable in plain sight. The town of Brookvale was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. Street lights flickered quietly, shops closed early, and most people knew their neighbors by name. For Officer Daniel Reed, night shifts in Brookvale were predictable and dull. He had been on the force for nearly 9 years, and he could count on one hand the number of serious incidents he had handled after midnight. That Tuesday night was no different, or so it seemed. Daniel drove slowly, sipping lukewarm coffee, his patrol radio silent. The air was cold, and a thin fog hovered over the empty streets. He passed shuttered stores, quiet houses, and dark intersections. At 12:17 a.m., as he turned into the old warehouse district, his headlights caught something unusual. A grey van was parked on the side of the road. The warehouses had been abandoned for years. No businesses operated there anymore, and no one had a reason to wait around at that hour. The van's engine was running, but the headlights were off. The windows in the back were completely covered. Daniel slowed down. It wasn't illegal to park there, and it wasn't illegal to sit in a vehicle. Still, experience had taught him that small details often mattered. He pulled over, turned on his side lights, and stepped out of the patrol car. As he approached the van, he noticed a sharp smell in the air, strong, chemical, almost burning his nose. He knocked on the driver's window. After a moment, the glass rolled down. Behind the wheel was a man who looked perfectly ordinary. Late 30s. Clean haircut, calm eyes. He smiled politely. "Evening, officer," the man said. Daniel asked what he was doing out there so late. The man introduced himself as Mark Holloway and said he was waiting for a friend who worked nearby. His voice was steady, confident. He handed over his license and registration without hesitation. Everything checked out. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The chemical smell was stronger now. Mark's smile never faded, but his eyes didn't quite match it. Daniel glanced toward the back of the van and asked what was inside. "Just tools," Mark replied easily. "I own a cleaning business." Daniel nodded, pretending to accept the answer. He returned to his patrol car to run the details, fully expecting nothing to come up. This should have been a quick stop, another forgettable moment in a long, quiet shift. But as the computer loaded, Daniel felt a strange tightness in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but this routine police check was about to uncover a truth far darker than anything Brookvale had ever seen. Daniel sat in his patrol car, watching the grey van through the windshield as the system finished running the license plate. The result came back clean. No warrants, no stolen vehicle report. On paper, Mark Holloway was an ordinary citizen. Daniel should have ended the stop right there. But just as he reached for the radio to clear the check, a small notification flashed on the screen. It wasn't an arrest alert, it was worse. The van's description had been mentioned in 2 separate missing persons reports filed over the last month. Same color, same model. Partial plate match reported by witnesses. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He looked back at the van. Mark was still sitting inside, hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. From a distance, he looked relaxed, almost bored. But Daniel noticed something new. His foot was tapping lightly against the floor, fast and nervous. Daniel stepped out again and approached the driver's side. "Mr. Holloway," he said evenly, "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle for a moment." Mark paused for just a second. It was brief, but noticeable. Then he smiled and opened the door. As he stepped out, Daniel saw his hands trembling slightly. "Is there a problem, officer?" Mark asked. "Just a routine check," Daniel replied. Daniel asked if he could take a quick look inside the van. Mark hesitated, then nodded. "I don't see why not." The back doors were heavy. When Daniel opened them, the smell hit him hard, cleaning chemicals mixed with something sour and unnatural. Inside were large plastic sheets folded neatly, coils of rope, rolls of duct tape, and thick gloves stacked with care. There were no mops, no buckets, no company logo. At the far end of the van sat a large industrial freezer, scratched and dented, humming quietly. A small generator was strapped beside it, still running. Daniel turned to Mark. "What's in the freezer?" Mark swallowed. "Frozen meat. I deliver to restaurants." "Which restaurant?" Daniel asked. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. He shrugged. "I don't have the paperwork on me." That was enough. Daniel stepped back and called for backup, his voice calm but urgent. Mark's breathing grew heavier. His confident posture faded, replaced by stiff silence. Minutes later, 2 more patrol cars arrived. With officers standing ready, Daniel ordered the freezer opened. When the lid was finally forced up, the night went silent. Inside was something no one was prepared to see. In that moment, the missing persons cases were no longer reports on a screen. They were real. And the truth Daniel had sensed from the start was now impossible to ignore. By sunrise, the quiet town of Brookvale was no longer quiet. Police tape wrapped around the warehouse road, flashing lights reflected off empty buildings, and rumors spread faster than facts. Mark Holloway was taken into custody without resistance, his face blank, his eyes distant. Detectives worked quickly. What they found in the van was horrifying, but they feared it was only the beginning. A search warrant was issued for Mark's home, a small, well-kept house in a friendly suburban neighborhood. Neighbors stood outside, watching as police cars lined the street. Many shook their heads in disbelief. Mark was known there. He waved at people. He helped carry groceries. He attended local charity events. No one had ever reported him for anything. Inside the house, everything looked normal at first. The living room was tidy. Family photos hung on the walls. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, as if someone had just left. There were no signs of violence. Then, officers reached the garage. Behind a large metal storage shelf, they found fresh scratches on the wall. When it was moved aside, a hidden door was revealed. Inside was a narrow room built carefully to block sound. The walls were covered with thick foam panels. A single chair sat in the center. Metal hooks were fixed into the ceiling.
They're watching.
Detectives searched deeper.
They're all connected.
On a table, they discovered stacks of photographs. Each photo showed a different person, men and women of various ages. Some were smiling, unaware. Others looked frightened. Written on the back of each photo were dates, locations, and short notes. Some names matched missing persons reports. Others were completely unknown. A computer found in the room told an even darker story. Files were organized by year. Each folder contained notes describing routines, habits, and weak points. Mark had studied his victims carefully. He didn't choose randomly. He planned. Investigators realized Mark had been living 2 separate lives. During the day, he was a respected business owner. At night, he became someone else entirely, cold, patient, and methodical. The most chilling discovery came last. In a locked cabinet, detectives found a notebook labeled simply, "Progress." Inside were tallies, dozens of them. Each mark represented a victim. This was no single crime. As officers counted, the room fell silent. This was a long, hidden pattern of violence that had gone unnoticed for years. Brookvale had not just been sharing space with a killer. They had been living next door to one. For 2 days, Mark Holloway said nothing. He sat in the interrogation room with perfect posture, hands folded neatly on the table. He asked for water. He asked for a lawyer. But about the freezer, the photographs, and the hidden room, he remained silent. His face showed no fear, no anger, no regret.
It's all here.
Detectives reviewed the evidence again and again. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the body found in the van was not an isolated case. Time was critical. Families were waiting. More victims could still be undiscovered. On the 3rd day, Mark surprised everyone. He requested to speak. The room was quiet as the recorder was switched on. Mark leaned back in his chair and sighed, as if he were tired of pretending. He didn't deny anything. He didn't argue. Instead, he spoke calmly, almost casually. He said the police stop was unlucky timing. According to him, he had planned to dispose of the body before sunrise. The routine traffic check, he claimed, had ruined everything. There was no panic in his voice, only annoyance. Mark admitted the freezer in the van contained his most recent victim, taken less than 12 hours earlier. He described his actions without emotion, as if he were listing steps in a process. Detectives struggled to listen, but they needed the details. When asked why he did it, Mark paused. "I liked being invisible," he said. "People trust normal faces." He explained how he chose victims who lived predictable lives, people who walked alone, people who wouldn't be missed right away. He followed routines, memorized schedules, and waited patiently. Control, he said, was the real reward. As the questioning continued, detectives realized something terrifying. Mark wasn't guessing dates. He wasn't struggling to remember details. Every name, every location, every method was clear in his mind. He had rehearsed this moment. Mark then revealed the truth investigators feared most. The number of victims was far greater than what had been found so far. He had kept careful records. Some bodies, he said, would take time to locate. The room fell silent again. This was not a man seeking forgiveness. This was someone proud of his secrecy, impressed by how long he had gone unnoticed. By the end of the confession, detectives understood the full weight of the case. Brookvale wasn't facing a single horrifying crime. They were uncovering the work of a serial killer who had been hiding in plain sight for years, until one routine police check brought his world to an end. Mark Holloway was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Families of victims, some of whom had waited years for answers, wept quietly, clutching photographs and letters of lost loved ones. For them, justice had finally arrived, but it was a hollow relief. Nothing could undo the horror Mark had caused or the years of fear, uncertainty, and grief his actions had inflicted. Officer Daniel Reed received recognition for his vigilance and instinct. His decision to trust that uneasy feeling during what seemed like an ordinary traffic stop had prevented further tragedy. For Daniel, it was a bittersweet victory. He knew he had stopped a monster, but he also knew that Brookvale would never feel entirely safe again. He often thought about what could have happened if he had ignored the van, driven past it like any other night. That thought haunted him more than any criminal he had ever caught. The town of Brookvale tried to move forward. Residents returned to their routines, businesses reopened, and children played in the streets once more. But the sense of normalcy was fragile. Parents walked their children home with tighter grips, neighbors kept a closer watch on each other, and people spoke in hushed tones about the man who had hidden so much evil behind a friendly smile. Even years later, those who lived through the case would shiver at the memory of the grey van and the chilling revelation it had brought. Mark Holloway's case became a study in criminal psychology. Experts analysed his meticulous planning, his ability to maintain a facade of normalcy, and his chilling detachment from his crimes. They concluded that Mark's ability to hide in plain sight was a combination of careful observation, patience, and manipulation. It was a warning that danger could exist anywhere, even in places that seemed perfectly ordinary. For the families, the pain remained, but so did the small comfort that the truth had been uncovered. They could finally grieve openly and honor the lives that had been stolen. Memorials were established and support networks strengthened to help those affected by such crimes. Brookvale would never forget that a routine police check, something so mundane it could be dismissed as everyday life, had uncovered one of the darkest secrets the town had ever faced. The story of Mark Holloway remained a haunting reminder. Monsters do not always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they live next door, smile at you in the street, and vanish into the ordinary until someone notices the small signs, like a hunch that won't let go. And in that silence, the lesson echoed. Vigilance, instinct, and courage can prevent horrors that might otherwise go unnoticed.